we'll get started. In the past 2 years, there has been an unprecedented focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DE&I, prompted greatly by the 2020 murder of George Floyd, followed by months of Black Lives Matter protests. Business leaders have finally begun to recognize the racial inequities embedded deep within the systems in which we operate every day, including our workplaces. Many organizations have responded with a commitment to change the way they operate. As a result, many are searching for their first Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion professional. Hello, I'm Louis Montgomery. I lead JM Search's Human Resources and Diversity Officers practice. I'm a former HR and DE&I leader. My team and I recruit HR and DE&I leaders for a wide variety of different types of organizations. I'm very pleased to lead what I believe will be a very lively panel discussion with 3 individuals, 2 who have hired DE&I professionals in their organizations, and 1 inaugural DE&I leader. The panel of speakers will share personal stories, insights, and learnings of how to ensure you're enabling success when hiring for this ever important role. Some areas we will cover are the impetus and business objectives of hiring your first ever DE&I professional, scoping the role, where does it sit, priorities and learnings of the first year, and the impact on the organization, how is success measured. Before I introduce the panel, here are a couple of housekeeping items. The session will run 1 hour, so until 1:30 Eastern Time, 12:30 Central. I have a number of questions that I'll ask the panelists, and we'll leave about 15 minutes for Q&A from the audience at the end. Please use the Q&A button in Zoom. We'll try to get to as many of your questions as possible. We'll produce some follow-up materials after the Thanksgiving holiday about this session, so please be on the lookout for it. Now I will introduce our panelists in alphabetical order. Ian Lee Brown is the inaugural Vice President, Chief Diversity and Belonging Officer at the Duke University Health System in Durham, North Carolina. Duke University Health System is a world-class hospital healthcare network supported by outstanding and renowned clinical faculty, nurses, and care teams. Ian's been in his role since July of this year. He has an extensive background in DE&I and organizational development in healthcare and senior living from several organizations, including Erickson Senior Living, Aegis Living, CCH Living, and now the Duke University Health System. He is a frequent speaker on the topic of DE&I and belonging. He has graduate degrees from Johns Hopkins University in organizational development and liberal arts from Lake Forest College. Welcome, Ian. Our second panelist is Sasha Diskin. Sasha is the Vice President for Talent, Diversity, and Inclusion at Horizon Therapeutics, a fast-growing biotech company focused on the discovery, development, and commercialization of medicines that address critical needs of people impacted by rare autoimmune and severe inflammatory diseases. She has a deep background in human resources, including talent management, organizational development and effectiveness, and HR consultancy across several major organizations, including Baxter International, Bank of America, and Willis Towers Watson. Their efforts at Horizon have led to their being recognized as the #1 best places to work in biopharma by Fortune magazine. She has an MBA from DePaul University and an undergraduate degree in political science and international relations from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. Welcome, Sasha. Our last panelist is Paula Fry. Paula is the Chief HR Officer for Ecologistics, a leading provider of technology-enabled transportation and supply chain management services. She has an extensive background as a human resources leader across a variety of diverse set of organizations, including the Education Corporation, where she was the EVP and CHRO, Sears Holding, where she held a number of HR roles, including interim CHRO, and at Motorola, where she began her career and gained progressively larger and more complex roles in the areas of M&A, business partnering, talent acquisition, and talent management. Echo Logistics has won a number of awards, including Best and Brightest Places to Work in Chicagoland in 2022, as well as in 2020, and a top 100 employer for both entry-level and interns. She has an undergraduate degree in organizational management from Illinois State University. Both Sasha and Paula hired DE&I professionals for their organizations within the last 2 years, and we'll start our questions with you. Okay, Sasha, when and why did Horizon Therapeutics make the decision to hire your first ever DE&I professional?
Yeah. So, Louis, I think in your setup, you talked a little bit about the context from a couple of years ago. And I'd say, Horizon has really been anchoring on diversity, equity, inclusion, and what we dub as allyship for several years. And really the precipice and impetus for, really doing more, driving more impactful change. And making sure that we were more laser focused on all of these areas and impacts is really in the summer of 2020. And so we really identified the need to no longer, I'd say, piecemeal the work across myself and other team members, but really to have somebody who was going to lead us from a programmatic, strategic perspective and bring together the really many stakeholders from across the organization, as well as external partners to do the work and to do it well.
Great. Thank you for that, Sasha. Same question for you, Paula. When and why did you make the decision to hire your first ever DE&I professional?
So very similar time frame as Sasha pointed out for her company. We have been pretty active in the DE&I space, but very much led, as part of people's roles within HR. And so, I'm certainly not going to say that we weren't doing anything. It was definitely an area of focus, but without the dedication of someone who wakes up every single day, thinking about how to make this a better place to work, it oftentimes got put on the back burner. And just, really that summer of 2020, it became very evident, that our employees wanted and expected more. And so we actually started out first by hiring a consulting group. We hired the Vicati group that came in that really did kind of a needs assessment on where we are at. And then, helped us put together really a straw man strategy. And part of that strategy was to bring in our first DEI leader.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Paula. Sasha, tell us where this role sits within your organization and why you've decided to position the position there.
Yeah. So just for context, so I report to our head of HR, and since kind of the restructuring, bringing in our DEI focused leader, the head of HR, or Irina Konstantinovsky, also took on the role as Chief Diversity Officer. And so I report to the Chief Diversity Officer and head of HR. And in my role, my team is comprised across different areas of talent acquisition, talent management, learning and development, as well as inclusion, diversity, and a few other areas. And so as we were, as we set out to identify a leader for DEI, it really made sense for us to bring someone in as part of my leadership team, given the strong anchor points to our human capital work. And so that was a lot of the rationale. Her work transcends far beyond my team. And so a lot of the things that we do relative to culture change and change management that is under my leadership really is a nice synergy there. And so the role that I'm talking about is a Senior Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Horizon.
Okay, great. How about you, Paula? Where does the role sit within your organization and why?
So the role reports directly into me, so the CHRO. And we had some debates on this when we were putting the job spec together, and we were really debated 3 places to have it report. One, reporting into the CEO. And what I would say is Sharmila Fowler really does have a dotted line report into the CEO and a lot of access to our CEO. So we knew that was going to be really important. But I think where a lot of the work actually gets done is within HR. So whether it's on the talent acquisition side of, working your pipeline, or it's on the talent movement side, so much, I guess I would call the HR team is really the shepherds of that. And so we just felt like from a day-to-day standpoint, we would get more traction if it reported into the CHRO.
Got it. Okay. You both mentioned that you started your efforts in the summer of 2020, which was a peak of activity for many organizations. Can you talk about your search process? Would you start, Sasha, tell us about your process of identifying folks and your experience in going through the actual search process?
Yeah, sure. Well, we had a very strong partner. Thank you, Louis and Phil. I think if I think about the things that are most poignant to share, I think it really comes down to, what is the role and what are the requirements that we thought we needed. And I think that there were some things that I think we have a question later, so I don't want to cannibalize too much. But as we think about the search process, what was really important to us was to find someone who has demonstrated impact and change in the areas of diversity and inclusion. And I think to the point that, we saw a lot of people who have engaged in the area or experts in the area. But if you really peeled the onion quite a bit and into kind of what were the impacts, what were the kind of work that people were driving, and what did that look like? What were the strategies and plans? I think that we had a lot of interesting conversations relative to that, and wood and style, I think, was the other thing relative to Horizon's a very fast-growing organization. We really needed to be agile and have someone who was really going to take the time to listen and understand the context and the needs and kind of meet the organization where we were at and ongoing, were really attributes that we were looking for from a search perspective for the ideal candidate.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Paula, how about you? Tell us about your search process.
So I pretty much knew from the get-go I was going to need help in filling this role, because we certainly were not the only ones in the market at that time looking for a DEI leader. And I actually talked to a number of other CHROs and bounced some ideas and asked about, who was in their networks. And they were all like, good luck. It took us, 12 months to fill our role and stuff. So I knew I needed help, and was very, very happy with the support that I got both from Louis and Phil Menzel as well through our search. I mean, I think they really listened to where we were at in our journey, the style that would work within our organization. And we were really, really critical on our selection, because what I was fearful of is I needed someone who had experience that could teach us. I've never run diversity myself, so I needed someone who was strong enough that they could really guide the organization at all levels, even the executive level, and feel confident. But it was definitely a role, because it's our first ever DEI role. It's a role that they really needed to be willing to roll up their sleeves and actually do a lot of the work. The other thing is it was really important to us that we had someone that was approaching it from a teaching and a learning lens versus more of a shame, shame, shame. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't have done that. I knew that was never going to work and probably kill it if we had someone. And there were some people in the mix that we interviewed that I thought, oh, that's not going to work. So that was really important. And I definitely think Sharmila brings that to the table. She's very, very much a teacher and an educator, doesn't make you ever feel, stupid if you don't know why something, like, why is that a problem? Or why would that come across offensive? So she's really, really great. And her background is she actually worked at McDonald's. So what we were really looking for was someone who, not necessarily a chief diversity officer, but someone who has worked in a sophisticated organization that could bring those learnings to us.
Okay, great. I've got a question for you. You were working as a leader of diversity, equity, and inclusion during the summer of 2020. What changed inside of your organization as a result of all the activity that took place that summer?
Hey, Louis, it's really great to be here as well, and to be sitting in my role at the Duke University Health System. It's really great to be here. And lots changed. Lots changed within the organization where I was. Then it was at Erickson Senior Living, but I'll talk about the changes that happened here at Duke. So lots changed at the Duke University Health System after the murder of George Floyd, and some good changes. And I personally, as I said, I personally can't take credit for the change that occurred since I joined the organization 2 years later. But it did create a movement, what the health system now formally calls moments to movement. The murder of George Floyd was a significant moment that caused a movement across the country, and certainly here at Duke Health. But it wasn't just George Floyd alone. It wasn't just George Floyd's murder alone. It was all the other things that as a country we're dealing with, the major social unrest, the divisive politics, and certainly the pandemic that we were all dealing with and still dealing with to a certain extent now, that I think caused the system to begin to look more deeply at the harmful impacts of racism and essentially woven through all of these events. The Moments to Movement anti-racism effort created the opportunity for dialogue about the impact racism has had on the lives of all of us, and particularly on people of color. So while Duke has had a long-standing commitment to diversity and excellence, the Moments to Movement opportunity lended itself to deepening listening sessions, had team members share their personal stories just about the impact of racism on them. And it also created a pledge. And this is the pledge that the system created. I'm sharing a little bit of it, but I'll read some of it. It says, Duke Health stands against racism, our pledge to our patients, our people, and the communities we serve. And in summary, it says here, racism, hatred, and intolerance have no place at Duke Health. We therefore commit to an unwavering collective stance against systemic racism and injustice. We recognize this is a journey and will continue to challenge ourselves to lead change. And we make this pledge for the advancement of health, for the good of our communities, and for our patients, their loved ones, our students and trainees, and each other. And from all of these efforts, I was invited to join Duke University Health System. And Louis, I'm so grateful because you're the guy who reached out to me first and said, hey, here's a great opportunity. So it's creating the opportunity for us to delve deeper into what it is that we see that could drive transformational change within the system, even as we've had that commitment. And one of the areas that we continue to focus on is this whole idea of inclusive leadership. How do we develop our leaders to be inclusive leaders, to be intentionally self-aware? Self-awareness is so important. I talk about myself from that standpoint that, I'm an immigrant, I'm a Black guy, and I'm also gay, and I'm proud and loud about it. It's really important for us to be able to do that. Understanding too, from the inclusive leadership side, that it's not just about being self-aware, but a willingness to be vulnerable about it. Understanding that vulnerability is not weakness, that it is courage. Developing leaders who are then empathetic, who are compassionate, and who also amplify the diverse perspectives of others around them as well. I think it's so critical for us to do that when we are self-aware and when we get to know people and build the kind of trusting relationships. It's therein that we can drive for high levels of accountability within the organization. And I think that's where we're heading in driving this and driving the ownership around this culture in such a way that all of us own it and can lead what we believe could be an even stronger culture of belonging.
Great, thank you for that, Ian. Paul, I'll start with next question will be for you, and then to Sasha. What's different at Ecologistics? You're more than a year into Sharmila's being on board. What's different there as a result of her having joined you?
So I think the first thing is that, we really have put together we never really had a strategy before, or we never really had a structure to support DEI. So we had business resource groups, but we didn't do a great job of sharing best practices and giving them funds to go off and be involved in the communities and so forth. So I think a lot of the structure that Sharmila put in place early on, we're really starting to see the fruits of that here now, a year plus. The other thing that happened is, two other things that is probably worth noting is when we hired Sharmila, we were a public company and we were bought, and we are now backed by a PE firm. And they have a lot of their own interest around DEI and ESG, especially as it relates to companies within their portfolio, and their investors are very interested. So it really, forced us to really get down to the, metrics and the detail, and, getting to the point of setting goals and all of that. And then the last thing, which has really come up in, I'd say probably the last 3 or 4 months, is supplier diversity. So the first year Sharmila was here, I would say she was heads down focused internally with our employees.
Mm-hmm.
And many of our customers and clients are, through the bid process, really insisting that we have an active role, not only in our own diversity efforts, but supplier diversity. And as you probably can imagine, in the trucking world, it's probably not classified as the most diverse, a lot of white male. So it's our efforts right now. We're trying to collect data on which ones are minority owned. We are trying to help them shift their attention and focus. And so it's starting, the work that she's doing is starting to move out into really our customers and clients as well.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Paula. How about you, Sasha? What's different at Horizon Therapeutics since you brought Heidi on board?
Yeah, so maybe while we were looking for Heidi, we did roll out some strategies and plans. So we did have work underway, but I think as Heidi has joined the company a little bit more than a year ago, it's really become apparent that this kind of work begets more work. And so as she started having conversations, building relationships, identifying opportunities, diving into data, partnering with all of those partners within HR, outside of HR, corporate social responsibility. We also are doing quite a bit of work in partnership with our patient advocacy group around health equity. I'd say it really there's just a lot of work to do, and we could probably have hired way more people, but very quickly we did bring in a manager of diversity and inclusion as well. So we do have another team member who works on Heidi's team focusing on DEI efforts. And so as we think about kind of the work itself, what's become a little bit more apparent is the degree to which it's becoming a little bit more embedded in the other work that we're doing, which has really been a key goal for us, is to treat it as part of how we work, part of our culture, not something in addition. And so that's really what Heidi's been able to bring to us, is really that cross-section, intersectionality in lots of different ways. And we have a lot of great work underway. So it's pretty exciting, the degree to which we are moving forward, driving change, and really moving through that journey.
Great, thank you for that, Sasha. Ian, given that you're the inaugural DE&I leader at the Duke Health System, and there are, again, so many things in which to do, how have you prioritized your work in this new role?
Thank you, Louis. One of the things that's really important in terms of me being in this role is walking in and understanding that this is a new organization for me. So it requires me to spend a lot of time listening, just listening, connecting, and building relationships with leaders across the business. And there's a quote that I know that says, "Listen with curiosity, speak with honesty, and act with integrity," because it's going to be really important as we go forward in driving the strategy around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, for folks to believe that you're listening, that you're building the kind of relationships that will engender the trust that we need to be able to create meaningful and purposeful change within organizations. So I think that's really important. So our focus, as I do that, and I'm intentionally doing that, because I think it's critical, I'm also building a strategy. Building a strategy that's going to support the work that we're going to do. And we're focused around 3 areas, and it's around talent, it's around education, and to Paula's point, it's around also supply diversity, and with a focus on also communication. One of the things that we often do is build all of these strategies and tactics, and also driving and getting results. But oftentimes we aren't telling the story about the work that we're doing, and folks are saying, "Joe, what are you doing?" So I think it's really important for us to be able to communicate the strategy, communicate the vision around DEI and V, but also communicating the wins that we're also having as well. Because when you communicate the wins and connecting them back to the individuals and the impact that it's having on them, then I think they're able to own it and to be a participant in the change that's happening across the business. So those are some of the things that we're doing. It's really important. And as I said, I think it's really important to look long-term, have a 2, 3, 4 year long-term plan. But it's also really important as you think about the plan that you are driving to some quick wins so people can see it and be behind you to follow you along the journey.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Sasha, question for you. How has the role evolved since Heidi first came on board? And then I'll have a similar question for you, Paula.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this a little bit more, and I think this is a little bit tricky because I think we're kind of evolving the role with the work and with the organization on this journey. And so I think when Heidi first came into the role, I had some I don't even know if it's expectations, but our expectation was that we'd figure this all out together because one, it's a new role. And 2, I think the challenge of this role is that it doesn't necessarily, at least the way we're operating, own or not exclusively accountable for a lot of the work itself, because the degree to which we want to embed diversity, equity, inclusion, allyship into all of our talent processes, into our community work. Heidi does own kind of our employee resource groups and kind of from a culture perspective for sure. But as we think about a lot of those other pieces, and Paula, you talked a lot about that with respect to why you structured the role and the reporting relationships that you did. I think it's evolved to the point that we're being a little bit more explicit and intentional about talking about role clarity and role accountability and expectations relative to Heidi's role and the other leaders who are driving a lot of the work. And I think it's been a little bit of grayness sometimes. And so that's a lot of what we're working through in a really positive way, because it requires just a ton of collaboration to move the needle and to iteratively make progress.
Okay, great. Thanks. Paul, you touched on this. I was going to ask you if you could elaborate a bit further around how Sharmila's role has evolved since she's been on board.
Yeah, a lot of similarities to Sasha. We're going to have to talk offline, I think. But what I would say is, probably the first 6 months was a lot of heads down around structure and really communicating and getting buy-in from the organization around structure. When I say structure, Sharmila is a one-person band. So it's not like she's got a team of people, but there are a lot of people that she leans on a regular basis, depending on the initiative, kind of at hand. So I think, Sharmila really needed to get a structure out there and bought in so that people understood how things come together, how they intersect, and all of that. So I would say that was probably a good first 6 months of it. The second kind of half of that first year really was a lot around getting to the data. We have a good HR system, but it's still tough to get some of the data out of the HR system, especially when you're comparing historical. But it's really, really important so that you have some barometers to really be able to measure whether you're moving the needle. So I know that Sharmila's had some frustrating months of really pulling that data, but it seems like every month we get a little bit better, a little bit crisper, with their data on that. And the big thing that the one thing that Sasha said that we're kind of, struggling with as we evolve is I try to correct people when they say, Sharmila owns DEI. Sharmila doesn't own DEI. She's helping us lead this, but the organization owns DEI. And I think where we really need to have our focus on a go-forward basis is a lot more around clarity of the roles and the partnerships with, different leaders in the organization, because it can't just be Sharmila coming up with the ideas. It can't just be Sharmila executing against those initiatives. Like the way Sharmila and I like to think about it is everything that we do on a daily basis, we should be looking at it through the lens of DEI. So whether it is, movement of talent, bringing talent in the organization, our, sales trips, our, value awards, how we structure performance management systems, how we go after clients, everything. You can't have DEI as a separate initiative sitting on the side. It's got to be embedded as part of it. And so that's really, I think, the message that we're a little bit right now, to be frank, struggling a little bit with. And I think it really is our kind of our evolution that we're in the midst of right now.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Ian, similar question for you. How has your role evolved? And also wanted you to talk about your reporting relationship, because it's a little different as well.
Yeah, and I'll start with my reporting relationship. It's I have a reporting relationship to the CHRO and the Chief Operating Officer. It's a dual role. I get to report to a fantastic CHRO, Rhonda Brandon, who's absolutely fantastic, and Dr. Craig Albanese, who's the Chief Operating Officer of the system, and thoroughly enjoy that. It works for us. It connects me to the HR business that we drive on a day-to-day basis in terms of attract, develop, and retaining talent, which is critical to driving culture, but also on the side of the Chief Operating Officer side, where I'm delving into issues around well-being, issues around supplier diversity, and also too, what I'll tell you is that I also lead workplace safety and workplace violence as well. So specifics around how my role has changed. The role is clearly focused on driving diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging across the system. It's and I always say to folks, you can't have me just driving DEI and B. It has to be embedded within the framework of culture. It's critical to be able to do that. So as we've thought about my role and my connections to leaders and all employees across the system, it's to what extent are we also involving me and the work I do into things around well-being, which is so critical to ensuring that our employees stay well. It's been really important for me to be able to do that. So I've taken on well-being. I've also taken on workplace safety and workplace violence, which, I mean, the reality is that Louis and team, it's that I think employees need to feel that they can walk into a place and feel safe. Psychological safety, also feel that the environment is a rich and safe place for them to work. It leads up to a culture of belonging, and it leads to them feeling even more well about their own selves. So we're driving all of that, and I am excited that I have the opportunity to partner with teams to be able to do that on a day-to-day basis.
Great, thanks. Start a question for you, Sasha, and then for you, Paula. Knowing what you know, you've learned a lot, obviously, in the last year and a half going through the search process and now having your first full-time DE&I leader. What advice do you have for organizations that are about to embark upon this journey?
Yeah, I think we've talked a little bit about some of the pieces, but in summary, I would say I think alignment with executive leadership relative to expectations, as well as an understanding that things will change and we have to be agile. I think what Paula, you talked a lot about the data, and I think that I think there's a question in the Q&A as well. The extent to which the data is driving our understanding of the opportunities is really what needs to fuel our journey and our actions as well. And it's iterative, right? We have to look at trends, we have to see how we're doing. But I think in my reflection, I think is that it's very difficult to set the path off the bat until you have someone who's going to be able to work with the whole team, across the organization to understand where are we at today. And as Paula said, I think that takes time. We're actually doing that through the HRIS data in the same way, as well as looking at our employee feedback and really double clicking into kind of perceptions and experiences of different, different groups at Horizon, and what are people telling us and how do we learn more? And I think that lends itself then also, and the third part of this is that, we talked a lot about goals, and we actually don't necessarily have we don't have quotas, we don't have specific numbers. We're really aspiring to, and we do pretty well in benchmarks as we look externally, but we really aspire to benchmark against ourselves and show progress and do better, whether it's representation, whether it's more diversity in senior leaderships, whether it's the experience of employees who have diverse backgrounds. And I think that as I reflect back, I do wish I had some of these talking points and perspectives going in. But I think part of our success to date is that we have been flexible and agile, and we have the support of the organization to shift and flex along the way. And for us, that's been a critical success factor so far.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Well, same question for you. Looking back over your year-plus journey, what are some of the things that you've learned, and what advice would you have for organizations that are about to embark upon this journey?
Yeah, so I would say the key word in what you just said is approach it as if it is a journey. So don't approach it as if it's an initiative, because initiatives, in my opinion, implies that there's a start and a finish. And there isn't a finish. I mean, it will continue to evolve. I like to tell people in the organization, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
And we basically want to show up and be better than we were yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that's, been kind of a key to our success. We're not overly dwelling on the metrics. I think the metrics are a good barometer. And of course, we rejoice when we see movement in those metrics, but we're really, focused in on making it better every day. And the one thing that I will tell you is you do have to be flexible. What I have found in the, our 15-month journey so far is the more you do, the more the organization wants. And that's a good thing. So, we weren't really communicating much to our organization on DEI before. We are out there almost weekly with different either educational messages or speaker series or updates on what BRG groups are doing or supplier diversity, whatever it is. And the interesting thing is the more you give them, the hungrier they are for more. So just be prepared. Sharmila's already hit me up for a few more resources next year. So we'll see if that makes it through the budget process. But definitely, if you do it right, the momentum will really start to swell. And it's kind of like communication. If you don't do it, no one asks about it. As soon as you start doing it, they want a ton more. And that's pretty much what we have found. And I think that's wonderful.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Paula. Ian, what about you? What advice would you have for folks who are going in as inaugural DE&I leaders?
Louis, that's it's such a great question, and I think it's I look at it from the standpoint of this is something that's awesome that you've been given this great opportunity to do something, to create something, or to build upon a legacy of leadership that's within the organization. How do you package what's there? I think what's really important is for this new leader to give themselves grace and also extend grace to others. I think it's really, really important. I think it's really important for folks to check in with those around them, be self-aware, model authenticity. I think the new DEI leader needs to be curious and build the kind of relationships that will drive stakeholdership across the business. And I think too that they just need to learn to amplify the diverse voices and build the kind of relationships that are built in trust. Because I really think that in doing so, it helps them to pull, and that's a key word, to pull, not push folks along the journey with them. I think if you can start with that, I think you're going to have some significant success.
Okay, great. Thank you. We've got a number of questions in the chat and in the Q&A. So I wanted to go through some of those and ask our panelists to respond to those. And I'll ask each of you to respond to this first one, which has to do with how are you measuring success? You talked about metrics, but I'm curious as to within each of your organizations, starting with you, Paula, what are some of the ways you are measuring success of your DE&I initiative?
Yeah, I mean, I do think you have to have some metrics, otherwise you can get just lost in activity. But I don't think it can be your sole focus. So, we've spent a lot of time of gathering baseline data of where we're at and are now starting to measure. We definitely have seen we're making movement in the talent acquisition front of bringing a more diverse talent population in the organization. We haven't quite seen the movement yet of the movement of talent within the organization. And so that's going to be a big focus of ours on a go-forward basis. Engagement survey results, we added a lot of questions around DEI in engagement survey. So that's a great way to really pulse your organization on what's hitting the mark, and what isn't. And then, just constantly talking and listening. We have a channel that we use. It's called Workplace. So it's kind of it's powered by Facebook, but it's like Facebook in the work environment, and it allows for very, very transparent conversations that happen through the organization. And so, the organization is very comfortable in being vocal on, the things that have really worked and they appreciate and they like, and where we're not, providing enough focus. So I think a lot of it is just listening to your employee base, listening to your clients and customers. But then you got to have some tangible measurements out there that you can show progress.
Got it. Great. Thanks for that, Paula. How about you, Sasha? How are you all measuring success at Horizon Therapeutics?
Yeah, I actually think almost everything Paula said hits right on. I mean, I would maybe just add on, I think another framing of it is really leading and lagging indicators. And so the extent to which it takes time to, shift the composition of your workforce where you need to, it takes time for talent mobility to be seen as an outcome. So those are more the, lagging indicators. But as we do a couple of surveys a year. And if I think of leading indicators, we're looking at the experience, the feelings and perceptions of our employees. And we're looking at different dimensions of diversity, and where we see, where we see like, what's going on, then we're going into listening sessions and asking those questions. And so I think it's very similar to what Paula said. I think the one thing I would add is we do have some accountability levers. I'd say they're a little bit light, but really starting with awareness as we think about like manager effectiveness and leadership effectiveness out of those engagement culture surveys where we do ask questions around people's experiences. It does include an aspect of belonging or inclusion, and we are going to start doing more of the reviews of the data with the dimensions of diversity lens. And so if you are a leader of a group, for us it's 5 or more, you may get some information, and it depends on the composition of the group. Maybe you don't get into dimensions of diversity unless you're much higher up in the organization. But we're going to start having more awareness of how people are doing leading their teams. And a lot of that just starts with awareness before we can get to accountability and data. But that's kind of where we are in the journey, with an understanding that leaders are really going to make a difference relative to their own self-awareness, as well as how they're being perceived by their team members.
Okay, great.
Louis, I can say ditto with some addition, like we want to make sure that we're looking at our leadership diversity, increase in percentage of BIPOC leaders, whether it's directors and above, promotion rates well, we spend a lot of time talking about acquiring leaders from outside, but what's really important as well is to what are we doing internally to promote diverse leaders, including women and LGBTQ to greater levels of responsibility. Paula and Sasha talk about belonging and commitment, the same, but also to supplier diversity. What are we doing in terms of our spend and connecting with diverse, with WIMBYs, women minority business enterprises, and also community social impact. That's huge. What are employees, because that's also another way to connect employees who are coming into organizations now are looking at, is the organization's values, do they connect to mine? What are the things that drive that in terms of social impact? Is the organization doing enough in terms of corporate social responsibility spend and things like that? So I think it's going to be really important as we drive a strategy here at Duke University Health System that we continue to monitor and look at those as well.
Mm-hmm. Got it. You've got another question for you. Given the challenge of doing this work, how do you keep yourself energized and well?
Yeah, and Louis, I talked about that before. I think it's really important for me to be self-aware. When I'm self-aware, I know what the stressors in my life are. It's really important for me to make sure that I'm delivering on the work that the university health system is asking me to do, but that I connect back and have balance in my own self and in my own life. A willingness to take time, understanding spend time with my husband and other friends. Also, a willingness to set boundaries. What are the boundaries that I need to set to ensure that I know I'm taking care of myself? Because there's a lot of work that we're doing, and the work that we're doing is hard. I want folks to think that it's easy. It's a lot of work that we're doing, and it can actually have an emotional drain on you as well. So I think it's really important for you to step back at times and make sure that you are taking care of yourself and have that balance that drives your own humanity.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. There's a question in the chat that I wanted to get to everyone. You've touched on this already, but it has to do with the size of your dedicated DE&I organization versus shared responsibilities among other folks, and realizing that again, all of you are in the early stages of your journey. So if you don't mind just sharing again, what do you have right now from a DE&I responsibility in terms of number of individuals, and where do you see this going over time? Let's start with you, Paula.
Yeah, so currently today, the only dedicated resource is Sharmila. We're probably going to add another resource in the budget next year that can really help kind of oversee like the BRGs and some of that work, because that really, if you're doing it right, that part of it takes a lot of time. What I will tell you is we rely a lot on people volunteering and helping. And there's a core group of individuals, I would say, there's probably 20 that are pretty active in helping Sharmila on a daily basis, but there's about 6 that, take a good chunk of their day to really help lead some of these initiatives. It would just, we could not be doing it with Sharmila alone. And so, I count our blessings that we've got that kind of organic interest in the organization. And, she's got someone who's leading the speaker series. We've got these movie nights where we watch a movie and then we debrief on it. The BRGs, some of the, supplier diversity stuff, all the stuff that goes with the vendor management side of things. So she really has had a lot of nice support from people that are very passionate. It just isn't their full-time job.
Mm-hmm. Got it. How about you, Sasha? Thanks for that, Paula. How about you, Sasha?
Yeah, so just so I mentioned Heidi is in her senior director role. We have Shweta, who came on board in the summer, and she's a manager, and a lot of her work is kind of the project management, a lot of the employee resource group management and coordination as well. And I think what's maybe, I don't know if this is unique, but I'll frame it up. The way that we work, similar to what Paula kind of said around partners with Heidi, but we actually purposely are connecting the role and expectations of the leaders around talent acquisition, hiring, when we look at total rewards, corporate social responsibility, as well as kind of health equity. We actually are, the way I think of it is actually almost Heidi supporting them. And so as we think about kind of the work that they're doing, it doesn't necessarily add to more work. It's really, again, comes back to what I think all of us talked about, is embedding DEI into our ways of working. So as an organization, I think we've come a long way in that nobody blinks when we talk about kind of what are we doing from a DEI lens in learning, in, you know, corporate social responsibility, maybe a little bit more obvious, but it's really, as we make those connections, we then overlay our 10 diverse employee communities or employer resource groups, and we try to connect the organizational strategies and work to their priorities and really come to the intersection of the work. And maybe, you know, this was really helpful to tell the story. And it's also really helpful as we look at budget allocation, prioritization, communication. There's only so much time in the day. There's only so much money. And I will also say, actually, one of the things we are awaiting to see if in our headcount next year as an organization, if we do have more dedicated support from a communications perspective for DEI. So we do use external support. I do believe if done well, this is a full-time job. And so that's what we're waiting to see if we're going to be able to do that as well. But I wouldn't underestimate the opportunity with communication to support all of this work and to tell the story.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Sasha. Ian, what do you have? I know you're, again, there are 4 months.
So,
and what do you have as for an organization thus far?
yeah, so certainly it's myself. I have a program manager who supports me, who supports all of the efforts around the affinity groups, business resource groups, and we have several of those. And I also have a director of culture and well-being who has whose focus is on a number of things, including restorative justice, various efforts like that, and she has 3 folks reporting up to her. We have a health system that has roughly about, I would say, about 25,000 employees. It's a fairly big place. And as we build our strategy, I think we're looking at what are the other positions that we need to be able to drive this well. One of the key areas for me is the analysis of our analytics. That's really, really important. What is it that the analytics are telling us for us to look at and to action plan around? What are our opportunities? I think there's the opportunity to spend a lot more time with our SOGI partners out there as well, sexual orientation, gender, and identity partners. And expression partners, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to do that. So I think there's a really high commitment on the part of this organization for us to drive this strategy, because we feel it's critical to strengthening our culture as we go forward. So as we build a strategy, I will be asking for a couple more staff to be able to support the work that we're doing as we go forward, and I believe that there's support for that.
Okay, great. There's a couple of questions in the chat about recruiting, and in particular around what sort of strategy, what has been the most successful strategies you've been able to employ thus far to bring greater numbers of underrepresented talent into your organization. Sasha, can you take that one, and then you, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, we deploy a variety of strategies. I'm not sure I can pick just one, but I do think in the last year, about a year ago, we entered into a new partnership with an external provider who helps us with our diversity job boards. And so as we look across all of our openings, really being more targeted and intentional. We also attend some diverse fairs. We recently attended National Black MBA and have had a couple of great outcomes there. And really, HBC HBCUs, we're working through building relationships and partnerships. So I think it's really for us, actually, we have a lot of partnerships. We almost need to focus and prioritize and make sure that as an organization, because you can come at this through corporate social responsibility, there's supplier diversity, there's early talent, there's recruiting, learning organizations. We actually are finding that we are looking at like making sure we have the whole list. We know who's the relationship manager and which ones are going to be the ones we should be focusing most on, so that we're not diluting our efforts as well. And so I think it's really about variety and also about prioritizing for us anyway.
Got it. Okay, thanks for that. Paula, how about you? Any particular strategies that have yielded success in finding more underrepresented talent?
Yeah, so one thing that I would make mention is that we do hire a lot directly out of college. So we have a lot of efforts at a college level. HBCUs, are obviously a target, but what we're finding is that can't be, your only source. So we are really, we added a couple of additional university relations people that really have split up the country around colleges that we've had the most success at. And one of the targets that they are really focusing in on is to get in there and penetrate and figure out how, even if it's not an HBCU, because we haven't had as great of luck with some of the HBCUs, but let's just say like a University of Wisconsin, how do we get in and figure out how we reach the minority populations and those minority groups on campus so that we're pulling those candidates in. So that I would say is a big one. We do a lot in the tech space and really have focused and done a lot of partnerships with minority and women groups on the tech side. We've hosted some events at ECHO, which I think has got our name out there a little bit more with some of those minority groups. And I think it's a little bit of process. You got to just try different things and know when you need to pivot and know when, a strategy just isn't working and you got to shift dollars and resources somewhere else. And then, the final thing that I would say is a lot of effort this year around making sure that our job postings are inclusive. So a lot of focus. We still have a little bit of ways to go, but partnering with our marketing organization on rewriting those postings, rewriting those job descriptions to make sure that they are inclusive.
Okay, great. Last question, Ian, can you talk about partnerships that Duke University Health System has entered into to find underrepresented talent?
Well, yeah, it's just saying, again, ditto to all of that. HBCUs, minoritinurses.com, all of those efforts that I think the university health system is doing. So similar strategies. Well, the one thing that I would say too is that one of the things that I've been spending time talking with our talent acquisition leader around some of these efforts as well is that we also need to go where diverse talent congregates. Yes, the Black MBAs, the AAPI groups and so forth, but in other settings that oftentimes we forget to look at, like the faith communities. On a Sunday, there's so much talent in the churches. You say the same thing about the synagogue. How do we advance opportunities to do that, to connect with those groups? The other thing too is that oftentimes we also wait until folks are in college or graduating from college. There's so much opportunity in the high school arena as well for us to be able to begin to foster careers. And the reality too is that a lot of these high school students may not necessarily go to college. They want to get out because they may not know what they want to do yet. So they want a job right out of high school. So how do we foster that? And in so doing, bring them on and say, hey, you can work in environmental services or dining or culinary arts or things like that, but we could also help you figure out what you want to do in life. And maybe you end up being a nurse and so forth. So great opportunities like that. I remember too that in my prior work, one of the things that we did, and this is non-traditional, is that when I was in Boston, one of the things that we did was also connect with the gay bars in Boston. lots of folks that you could hire from settings like that as well.
Mhm.
So it's non-traditional, and we need to think outside the box. The talent market is so tight. So we have to figure out ways to bring new people and new opportunities to the table that allows us to be able to be attractive to different folks.
Sure. Unfortunately, we are out of time, and we could easily, there's a bunch more questions in the chat that unfortunately we won't be able to get to, but hopefully we've enlightened you. I want to first of all thank our panel, Paula, Sasha, and Ian. You guys have been incredible. Appreciate your candor and appreciate your insights. I also want to thank we got up to over 100 people who joined the webinar. So I want to thank you all for your participation and for your very, very thoughtful questions. Again, we'll be distributing a summary of this webinar in the coming weeks. Please be on the lookout for it. And with that, we'll sign off. Thank you all again for again your participation, and I hope this is added to your store of knowledge on this very, very important area. Take care.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
I know.
Thank you.
Thank you.